Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. Scientists have issued their starkest warning yet about the danger of climate change. In a dramatic report, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel says the world is nowhere near its target of keeping the rise in average global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Instead, it says we're heading for an increase of 3 degrees from pre-industrial levels. Well, the report says that just to stay on track would require rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes to all aspects of society. Our science correspondent Victoria Gill has this report.
Pictures of a warming world. Scientists are more confident than ever that the impacts of climate change are playing out now in the severity and frequency of droughts, storms and other extreme weather events. And having gathered in the South Korean city of Incheon for the past week, climate change researchers and government delegates hammered out the final details of a dramatic report outlining the consequences of a global temperature rise of more than 1.5 degrees, and a plan for precisely how that can be prevented.
So the scale of the changes that we are experiencing in the climate system is unprecedented. The scale of the changes that humans would have to implement in order to keep climate change under control is unprecedented. So it's a challenge for human civilization, and this report is therefore a milestone in conveying that message to human society.
Countries need to up their ambition and get moving now with climate change action if we're going to keep 1.5 degrees within reach.
With no action, the world is on course to breach this crucial target by as early as 2030, compromising the very livability of our planet. Hitting 2 degrees would mean coral reefs would be largely wiped out. Melting polar ice means that global sea level rise is projected to be around 10 centimetres more if we allow warming to go to 2 degrees. Keeping it to 1.5 means 10 million fewer people exposed to the risks of flooding. But this plan is ambitious and will be expensive. Renewable energy sources will need to provide about 85% of global electricity by 2050. Currently, they account for about 25%.
The renewable energy revolution that we've already seen unfolding around the world, it's going to be the key to the solution that starts from the energy sector, spreads to other sectors. I think we can definitely still do this if we decide that that's what we want to do.
Even with a green energy revolution, this most comprehensive assessment of the perils of climate change concludes that every one of us will need to make changes in how we live our lives. Changes that have to start now. Victoria Gill, BBC News.
Well, today's report has been described as a global wake-up call for the planet. So what exactly do governments and individuals around the world need to do to limit climate change? Our science correspondent Palab Ghosh reports.
The IPCC has warned of two possible futures for our planet. In the 2-degree world, there's severe drought. There's more flooding in the northern hemisphere. People are poorer and have less food. And all the coral in our seas has gone. As things stand, that's the world we're headed towards, the scientists warn.
And one of the very clear messages of this report is that, inevitably, at the rate we're going, it's quite likely we're going to release too much carbon, burn more carbon than we can afford to burn if we're going to stabilise temperatures at 1.5 degrees. So we're going to have to work out how to get rid of carbon dioxide without just dumping it in the atmosphere.
To avoid damaging global warming, the scientists call for much more renewable energy, the development of transport that uses less fuel, and new ways to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. All that is happening, but not, according to the IPCC, at the speed it needs to.
The scientists are saying to everybody we have to accelerate our action to tackle climate change, because if we don't, by the middle of this century, we could be facing a situation that we simply will not be able to cope with.
At a time when China and India are growing their economies, the planet's net emissions of CO2 needs to be zero by 2050 to prevent a 2-degree world. Up to 7 million square kilometres of land will be needed for energy crops, around the size of Australia. And the technologies needed to remove enough carbon from the atmosphere have not yet been developed.
The report's important because it also shows that there are options that we need to take. It shows that it is possible to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees if we have great transitions across the economy if we change the way we behave, such as eating less meat and eating more fruit and vegetables.
With the backdrop of President Trump taking the US out of the Paris climate change agreement, avoiding damaging climate change will be difficult, but not impossible. The question is whether national leaders have the political will to bring about the changes recommended, or it will be too little, too late. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.